The Paralympics has done much to change how people see disabled people in our society. Should the Games also change our perspective on unborn children with disabilities too? An alliance of pro-life campaigners and religious groups in England is seeking to restrict the 1967 Abortion Act, which currently allows doctors to terminate pregnancies on the grounds of physical abnormality. That act has never applied in Northern Ireland. Here, a woman can only have an abortion if there's a risk of having permanent or long-term mental health issues or physical life impairment caused by a pregnancy. But we do know that women here are travelling to England for terminations of pregnancies permitted there by the 1967 Act. The signatories of this latest campaign say that while pregnancies can be terminated even up to 40 weeks on physical grounds in certain circumstances, the moment the child is born, a moral fault-fast is performed and the official approach is full of compassion. So we're asking, shouldn't we treat unborn children with disabilities or suspected disabilities with the same compassion as we treat recently born children with disabilities? Let's talk about that with Professor Jack Scarisbrick, who founded the charity Life over 40 years ago, and Kate Smurthwaite from the Abortion Rights Group. Good morning to you both.
Good morning to you, William.
Welcome to Sunday Sequence.
Thank you.
Jack, first of all, lay out the moral argument here. You see this as a form of discrimination as much as anything else.
Yes, indeed. But killing a child, whether able-bodied or disabled, is surely morally repugnant. But to do so because the child has a disability is not only morally repugnant, it's also very bad medicine, because doctors should be caring and seeking to cure, not killing their patients. And also, in most cases where there is a eugenic abortion, the pregnancy will have been wanted, and there will be a much greater risk of serious mental damage to the mental health of the mother, because she will always have this feeling that the child might not have been as severely disabled as the doctor said. There'll be perhaps a special sense of having betrayed the child, of having failed to love and care for the child. I'm not wanting to judge or condemn anybody, but objectively, I think that to destroy a human being in the womb because that human being has a disability is simply uncivilised.
Kate, I suspect you'll take issue with that phrase, eugenic abortion.
Well, absolutely. I mean, first of all, I should make the point that, I and my organisation are pro-choice. We're absolutely in favour of supporting women who are in difficult situations but want to continue with a pregnancy, regardless of what's going on in the womb. But we're also of the opinion that it's women who should have that choice. So firstly, I should mention that when we talk about fetal abnormalities, we're talking about a much broader range of issues than anything that would be covered simply by the term disability. For example, there are conditions which mean that the child almost certainly will be stillborn, almost certainly will have absolutely no chance at a normal or reasonable life. And we also can talk about issues like, for example, Huntington's syndrome, which is it's a condition you can be born completely healthy and normal, but you know that later on in life it's going to give you a really high chance of having then a very painful, long and torturous part of your life and a very painful death ultimately. And so, what we actually find is that abortion is a really important issue for many disabled women around the UK, because they have conditions which they don't want to pass on to the next generation in some cases. And of course, if they want to have the tests that they can have and find out what their child has got and what their child hasn't got and make the decision at that point, we support them at that point and right the way through. And for many disabled women, they simply wouldn't be able to have children if abortion wasn't available, because they're at much greater risk of having complications during their pregnancy and much greater risk of having to terminate for their own health and safety.
Use that
Finally,
word. You use the word normal. Aren't children born with disabilities normal?
Well, absolutely, but we're not talking. I'm not talking about a normal child or whatever. What I'm talking about is a normal pregnancy. Lots of things can go wrong during a pregnancy, and one of the things that can go wrong, for example, is the baby can die. And I don't think that it's fair to turn around and say, no, you've got to keep carrying that around. Let me get to the point, though. Here's the thing. To be honest, I don't really mind what reasons women are using. I think it's absolutely horrible when Jack would use an expression like eugenics. What we've actually got in a lot of cases is women who really want to have a child and are given absolutely devastating news. And I think to accuse those women of being eugenicists, no, a lot of these women have made the decision that if there's any way they can keep the child, they will do. But of course, that's not always possible. There are often times when the kindest and least least painful thing for everybody involved is to have a termination. I think it's quite unpleasant to be judging women in that way. The point is this: whatever the reasoning is, whatever a woman's reasons are, if you say to a woman that she can't have a termination, what you're saying to her is that you wish to force her to continue with a pregnancy and to give birth against her will. And for me, it's the adult woman, whether she be able-bodied, disabled, or whatever. My point is that her condition and her situation has to be the priority, because she is an adult human being and she has the right to choose what happens to her body. I understand that Jack doesn't agree with that, but I think what is obvious is that his opposition is to abortion in general. And so what his organisation is doing is extremely cynical and extremely unpleasant, hanging his unpleasant opinions on the back of something brilliant and empowering and fantastic like the Paralympics. The truth is, he doesn't oppose abortion on the grounds of disability. He opposes abortion point blank on any grounds. He opposes abortion even where the woman has been raped or a victim of incest. And to suggest that, what he's looking for is a loophole here where he can hang a little bit of his opinion on the back of somebody else's brilliant performance. And I think that Paralympians around the country would be disgusted at his attitude.
Let's give Jack a response to that. You're capitalising on the PR success of the Paralympics.
No, I'm simply saying that we should surely think again about what disability means, because the Paralympics have actually blurred the distinction between able-bodied and disabled, and we're just hoping that people put two and two together and say, look, we have seen this wonderful display of courage and conquering adversity. Now, when we have all that negative attitude that we've just been hearing towards the disabled child in the womb, surely we should think again. And the disabled child in the womb is a fellow human being, has as much right to life as an able-bodied, has as much right to life as his mother. And what I'm against is this discrimination against children, unborn children, and particularly against disabled unborn children. This seems to me incompatible with a civilised society. And I'd like to go on to say, we heard a lot about how difficult it is to cope with a disabled child. Yes, I entirely understand.
I didn't say that at all. I didn't use those words once. You're making up words that I didn't say. Please don't answer points I haven't made, Jack. That seems pointless to me. What debate are we having? Don't pretend that I've said things that I haven't said. I didn't say anything about raising a disabled child. Didn't use that expression. Haven't discussed it. If you want to start doing so, but please don't start by putting words into my mouth.
I think I should be allowed to continue.
Please do. Yeah.
Not if you're going to do so by lying, Jack. No, I don't think you should.
I would like just to make this point, that we have achieved in England and in Northern Ireland a wonderful development in children's hospices and Zoe's Place baby hospices. And this is the right response, it seems to me, to the challenge of the disabled child. I repeat, that child is as much a human being as anybody else, and it deserves and merits the full compassionate care and love as anybody else does.
Can I ask you both a question really to do with the morality of this? Obviously, there are lots of other issues involved, and you're both raising them. But one of the arguments that's used, one of the moral arguments that's used in this debate to defend terminations, Kate, in these grounds of likely disability or fetal abnormality, is that this termination is not just in the best interest of the mother in certain situations, it can be in the best interest of the child as well.
There absolutely are situations in which, parents have to make a very difficult decision. We will hear, of course, from Jack about those occasions when inevitably, and it's fantastic that this happens, where doctors have a pretty poor prognosis and the outcome turns out to be better than people had expected. There are, of course, cases where the exact opposite happens. There's a very sad book called, I believe it's called Andrew's Long Goodbye, about a couple who decide to go ahead and continue a pregnancy in spite of having had test results which seem to indicate there's a pretty significant problem, and they then spend 18 months watching a tiny infant on a ventilator and come to regret having not made a braver decision earlier on. But of course, that's their decision, and I'm not against them making their decision. I think it's tragically sad when things go wrong like that. But if I might just make one more point. What is absolutely terrifying is that Jack would suggest that having a termination on the grounds of fetal abnormalities constitutes discriminating against the disabled. There are women out there, of course, who decide to have an abortion because the relationship they're in has recently turned violent. Would he say that, therefore, that's discriminating against children whose parents are violent? Of course not. There are people out there who choose to have a termination because they've just lost their job and they suddenly feel like, I really can't continue with this pregnancy. Is that discriminating against the children of the unemployed? No, none of these things are discrimination. What we're talking about is an adult human being, a woman who should have the right to make the decision about what happens to her own body. In the same way, you shouldn't be able to force someone to donate a kidney. You shouldn't be able to force someone to do anything that they don't want to do against their will. And you shouldn't be able to force someone to remain pregnant and go through the whole 9 months of pregnancy and the whole potentially very traumatic process of birth if she doesn't want to. And all we're saying here is that to say a woman is not allowed to choose on abortion is to say a woman must be forced to be pregnant against her will. And that in itself is a form of eugenics, and a very unpleasant one, and one which I and my organisation will continue to fight, whatever unreasonable sort of red herrings are thrown up by organisations like Jack's.
Jack, the word discrimination is obviously a very, very colourful one, very heated one in this debate. Is it useful in this debate to use that kind of language? This is a moral decision that someone makes under very fraught circumstances. They consider the issues involved, they take counselling advice, they make a moral decision. Why describe that as discrimination?
Well, in particular, the discrimination is because abortion is allowed up to 40 weeks of a disabled child, whereas the time limit is 24 weeks for other children. So there is immediately a discrimination. But where a child is killed because...
Well, you can call it discrimination, but you could just equally call it a moral decision, couldn't you?
No, it's discrimination. But I'm sorry, what I've been hearing is rather a farrago of this, that and the other. The crucial thing, surely, is that the unborn child is a fellow human being, whether disabled or not. And a just society allows, protects the life and should give full legal protection to every human being, regardless of age, size, or whether disabled or not.
Do you think this campaign on the back of the Paralympics is likely to have some success, Jack?
I hope so. I hope that an MP will, for example, use the private member's ballot, and maybe if it comes high in that ballot, will choose to present a bill which would repeal that disgraceful part of the 1967 Act. But that we have to hope and wait and see.
Kate, there doesn't seem to be much moral debate about this in England these days. The recession has overtaken most other issues.
Well, absolutely. This is something which it comes up regularly, and it comes up regularly because there are people like Jack. There's a small minority who have a strong, normally, led by a sort of fundamentalist religious position, a very strong feeling about this, and so it comes up. But the statistics in the UK, across the UK, suggest that about 17% of people are not in favour of a woman's right to choose. So it comes up again and again. But what tends to happen is that again and again it's simply pushed back. And in actual fact, I'd welcome it being raised in Parliament, because what we tend to find happens as soon as one of the small number of anti-choice MPs gets up and makes a statement like this is that, of course, the opportunities arise to add amendments to that kind of thing to actually do something useful when it comes to abortion. And it's fascinating because at the very, very top of the show there you mentioned all the women from the Republic of Ireland and from the north of Ireland who come over to England, Scotland and Wales to access abortion services, and indeed also go to places like Holland and other parts of Europe. And it's absolutely something which we could be addressing. It's absolutely unfair, in my mind, that we call it a national health service, and yet one group of women are entitled to less services than other groups of women. That, to me, is an absolute human rights issue, and I think it's absolutely vital that we get these issues back on the table and start doing what we can to sort that out.
Jack, a final brief word from you.
Well, I'm sorry, it's a clear issue here. Does a just society kill people who are disabled? I think a just society does not. All abortion is defeatist and negative, but killing a child because it's less than perfect seems to me utterly incompatible with true justice and civilization.
Jack, if you're against abortion, can I strongly recommend you don't have one?
All right, thank you very much.
I'm sorry,
Kate.
I just don't understand what you're saying.
As a man, really, does your opinion matter on this? Why get involved in telling women what to do with their bodies? Isn't that in itself quite offensive, Jack?
Well, I'm a human being, and I'm wanting to protect my fellow human beings from being exploited and killed.
Well, allow them the right to choose what happens to their own bodies then. And you choose what happens to your body.
Who gave them that right? Who gave them that right?
Do you really believe people don't have the right to decide what happens to their own bodies? I mean, if so, I think you are a despicable human being, Jack.
Now, come on, Kate, we can't allow this kind of language. Honestly, we're having a moral conversation about this.
But he's saying that people don't have the human right.
You're really not advancing your own argument here.
what, to call him a despicable
no,
human being?
you can't do that.
But he says that I don't have the right to decide
there
what
is an
happens
important level
to
of
my
civil
body.
debate that we have to do
I think
justice
I'm being
to here.
very calm
No,
and
that's very
civilised
uncivil.
here.
That's very uncivil to you.
Well,
you can make a
use
strong
whatever you
moral
like.
argument. You can make
Okay,
a strong,
here's what
but
I'm
don't
saying.
attack him personally.
Okay, here's what I'm saying. I'm talking to somebody who believes that I don't have the right to choose what happens to my
No,
body.
I'm
To me, that is
asking-
someone who opposes basic fundamental human rights.
I'm
I don't know
asking
how
you-
else to express
Well, you're
that.
entitled to express it that way.
makes-
That's perfectly fine. Let Jack reply to that.
Could I ask you who gave you that right? Where did it come from?
What? I mean, what a strange question. Why do I have the right to decide what happens to my
no,
body?
not why. No, where did it come from? Who gave you that
What do you mean,
right?
where does it come from? It comes from the
You're
fact that it's
claiming the
my
right.
body.
You're claiming the right. Who gave it to you? Show me the piece of paper on which that right is written.
I mean, you believe I don't have the right to decide what happens
No,
to my
I
own
am-
body?
I am
Okay, well,
asking-
that's your opinion, and you're welcome to it.
No, please.
But that's
Stop,
your
stop,
opinion.
stop. No.
What gives me the right is because my womb and my body is attached to me.
But why does that,
How-
why
how-
does that
how-
give you the right? Why does that give you the right to kill the child in the womb?
It gives me the right to decide what happens
gave
to
you
my
that
body
right?
because it's my body. Do I have the right to take one of your kidneys? Of course not. Do I have that right? Now, I could save someone's life with one of your kidneys. Do I have the right to come and
Sorry,
steal it?
would
No,
you
I
kindly
don't.
focus on my question?
This is my question.
No,
I
no,
could
I'm asking
so
you
if
the question.
I
Would
could
you
save
kindly-
someone's
would
life
you
by
kindly
taking one of
stick
your
to the point?
kidneys.
Would
No,
you
I don't have
kindly-
to. It's a meaningless question. Who gave me the right? I have
No,
the
it
right.
isn't. It's a very important question.
And it's a question we will return to because we often debate the foundations of rights here, whether it's in the Bible or in religious tradition or in human rights culture, but we can't resolve it at this point. And I think I better pull you two apart at this point. Thank you very much, Kate Smurthwaite from the Abortion Rights Group and Professor Jack Scarisbrick from Life for your very different and contrasting views on that moral dilemma posed by the Paralympics by some people.